Hello and welcome back to an episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben. Alan, One-Eyed George and I are going to Thailand soon, and if you want to follow along in preparation for the launch of our new food channel, remember to follow me on Instagram and like our Facebook page. We won't actually put any Thailand stuff on the Facebook page, we will on Instagram. I was just trying to trick you to like the Facebook page, but please do so anyways. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell. It really helps us out, and every time GF gains a subscriber, another child is abducted by Oni and turned into an alien-killing demon. So again, for the sake of kidnapping little children in order to turn them into super soldiers in the fight against Xeno scum, subscribe to our channel. Covering the lore of your favorite science fiction, fantasy, and action movie franchises is very enjoyable. As a matter of fact, I do it so much that the lines between fiction and reality begin to blur. I often find myself talking about Master Chief as an actual historical figure in casual conversations with normally functioning human beings. Given that, sometimes it's good and healthy to take a step back and look at the history of how some of our favorite franchises came to be. Today we start with Halo, the story of how two nobodies created one of the most popular video game franchises of all time and changed the video game industry forever. Our Halo origin story begins in 1990. A time when Super Mario World had taken the world by storm and teleportation hadn't quite made it into the mainstream yet. In 1990 Chicago, while his friends were out enjoying the vibrant city, University of Chicago mathematics major Alex Seropian spent his days and nights indoors working away at writing a Macintosh program. Of course, back then the University of Chicago didn't offer computer science degrees because, well, it was kind of a new field of study. But back to Alex. When all was said and done with his program, he had created an epic masterpiece of gaming. I give you NOP. Intense, I know. Almost 20 years after the world was introduced to Pong, Alex had made a similar game and called it Pong backwards. Seropian released the game free of charge, but a handful of players paid him $15 a pop for the source code. Nonetheless, come graduation, he was living at home. And like any post-college young adult living with his parents and playing video games all day, his father was pressuring him to get a job. But Seropian didn't want to get a real job, and it wouldn't be easy to do so either with high levels of unemployment. So instead, he started a video game company in May 1991 and called it Bungie. He was able to publish his next game, Operation Desert Storm, after raising funds from friends and family, and creating the game boxes and writing the discs himself. I imagine his friends and family must have thought him to be crazy for investing his time and efforts into video games when he had a University of Chicago degree on his hands that he didn't seem to be using. But Operation Desert Storm sold 2,500 copies, and so Alex kept moving forward with his business. One good thing that did come from his time at the University of Chicago was meeting programmer Jason Jones in an artificial intelligence course. Of course, it may be no coincidence that given their mutual interest in AI, such technology would come to play a huge role in Halo lore. When the two met, Jones was porting a game he wrote called Minotaur: The Labyrinths of Crete from the Apple II to the Apple Macintosh platform. However, the two weren't exactly best friends out of the gate, as Jones later explained. Quote, "I didn't really know Alex in the class. I think he actually thought I was a dick because I had a fancy computer." Yeah, these guys were nerds, the kind that they don't even make anymore. Nonetheless, the two partnered to release Minotaur in 1992, with Jones doing the coding and Seropian doing the business side of things. The multiplayer game's tagline was, "Kill your enemies, kill your friends' enemies, kill your friends." A line you might recognize from the Slayer menu description in Halo 3. The game itself still only sold around 2,500 copies, as it required the use of an internet modem. Such technology was a rare sight in the average household back then, but it was this tech that helped distinguish it in the industry, as the game featured a multiplayer mode which functioned over AppleTalk, a suite of networking protocols developed by Apple Inc. for their Macintosh computers. Believe it or not, but without Apple, there would probably never have been a Halo. One more thing we begrudgingly have to thank Steve Jobs for. Mr. Jobs, if your consciousness is out there somewhere, downloaded onto an Apple computer, waiting to be implanted on the Apple Clone 5 in the year 2087, we thank you. Seropian and Jones remained fairly poor, but the sales they did make on Minotaur allowed them to pursue their next project. Inspired by Wolfenstein 3D, Jones wrote the first 3D texture-mapped game and first true first-person shooter for the Mac. The game, called Pathways into Darkness, was released in 1993 and became a critical and commercial success, winning multiple awards, including Macworld's Best Role-Playing Game. The game allowed Bungie to move from a one-bedroom apartment to a studio on Chicago's South Side, where they hired Doug Zartman, who became Bungie's PR person, who, according to a March 2000 article in the Chicago Reader, quote, helped nurture the jaded, attitude-laden, often sophomoric humor that had been an integral component of Bungie's corporate identity from the beginning. These guys were just a couple of idiots like you and me, and they needed some professional help. In a 2008 podcast, Bungie composer Martin O'Donnell remembered that the studio, a former girls' school next to a crack house, quote, smelled like a frat house after a really long weekend, and reminded Bungie staff members of a place in the Silent Hill video game series. By 1994, Bungie had a staff of 6 people. Their next project was originally planned as a sequel to Pathways, but ended up as a game called Marathon. Marathon was the first game to allow players to use the mouse to look up and down as well as side to side, and introduced vertical rocket jumping to gamers, a mechanic in first-person shooters that allows for boosted jumps using a rocket launcher or grenade, something first introduced as a horizontal capability in 1993's Doom. Bungie had also started to realize the importance of story given the success of Pathways into Darkness, and thus included computer terminals in Marathon where players could dive deeper into the game's lore. The story, set in outer space in the year 2794, follows a nameless Mjolnir Mark IV cyborg officer aboard the UESC Marathon who must defeat an alien invasion aboard the ship, at times needing the assistance of artificial intelligence, which proves to be increasingly unstable due to rampancy, or enhanced self-awareness, allowing the AI to develop greater mental abilities and even choose to disobey orders by overriding their own programming. Is this all starting to sound just a bit familiar? Fellow University of Chicago grad Greg Kirkpatrick, who worked on Marathon's game maps and story, spoke of life working on the game. Quote, "We were all kind of winging it at the time. A bunch of young guys who didn't know what the hell they were doing. It was just a lot of long hours, 6 months, probably like 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, eating a lot of pizza, drinking a lot of Coke." Thanks to the Bungie crew's hard work that produced the game's combination of revolutionary physics, dual weapon wielding, story, and networked multiplayer mode, Marathon blew up after its showing at the 1994 Macworld Expo and became the Mac's answer to DOS PC-only game Doom. In preparation for the game's December 1994 release, Bungie employees spent a day at a warehouse preparing boxes so that orders could be filled in time for Christmas. However, when tens of thousands of orders came in, they finally hired another company to handle that side of the business. By October 1995, the game had surpassed 150,000 copies sold. Marathon took Bungie from a cult Macintosh gamer following to the mainstream gaming community. The game earned a sequel with 1995's Marathon 2 Durandal, which introduced cooperative mode, a feature that would later become a staple in Halo. Seropian pushed Bungie to port the game to the Windows 95 operating system, a controversial move in the eyes of loyal Macintosh users, but certainly one necessary to grow the company, and Marathon 2 went on to outsell the original game. The third game, Marathon Infinity, was released in 1996 and closed out the series on a high note, with CNET declaring it the best Macintosh game of 1996. Bungie then saw success in late 1997 with the strategy game Myth: The Fallen Lords. Myth won numerous awards, including Strategy Game of the Year from both PC Gamer and Computer Gaming World. The game quickly saw its online community develop, and Bungie sold over 350,000 units, netting the company $14 million. Thanks in large part due to Myth, Bungie's profits increased by 2,228% from 1993 to 1997. All of a sudden, the two nerds from Chicago had the makings of a real company. Myth's success allowed Bungie to open a studio in San Jose, California, aptly named Bungie West, which eventually produced the third-person beat-em-up Oni. And with things going well, Jason Jones was looking for a new challenge, something that would combine Jones's love of old-school science fiction and Myth's real-time strategy gameplay. So while most of Bungie's 15-strong staff began work on Myth 2 Soulblighter, a few team members began work on a science fiction-based real-time strategy game that was temporarily codenamed Monkey Nuts and took place amidst a war on a planet called Solipsis. As the game was developed, the Bungie team felt that moving around tiny characters from the real-time strategy perspective was boring, and they needed a more interesting way for users to control units. So they added a mode that attached the game camera to the perspective of the individual units. The more they developed the game, the more the team realized how much more fun the gameplay was this way, and by mid-1998, the game had been recodenamed Blam, morphed into a third-person shooter, and the planet Solipsis became a Dyson sphere, an inspiration drawn from famous sci-fi writers like Larry Niven and Ian Banks. During this time, Bungie's team of artists worked away designing the artwork for the game. A young artist by the name of Shikai Wang produced a drawing of a badass futuristic cyborg soldier. After being beefed up for the 3D build, Master Chief was born. Of course, a whole host of further artwork would follow that would give life to the human and alien weapons and spaceships that would make up the game. Bungie realized that they had something special on their hands and invested a lot into their game, and so they needed to make sure to get the word out about it and build excitement. Peter Tamte, Bungie's executive VP at the time, pulled some strings to get Bungie a meeting with Steve Jobs. When Jobs saw the demo, he agreed to debut the game at the 1999 Macworld Conference and Expo. Once again, it was Apple that paved the way for Bungie and Halo.
We got it set up. Peter Tamte talked to people at Apple, got things going. We went out and demoed it to Steve about a week and a half ago.
But just more than a week before Macworld, the game still didn't have a permanent name yet. Many names had been floated around during development, such as the Santa Machine, Solipsis, the Crystal Palace, Hard Vacuum, Star Maker, and Starshield. A branding firm Bungie hired came up with the name Covenant, but it was Bungie artist Paul Russell who suggested Halo.
We are starting to see some great games come back to the Mac, but this is one of the coolest I've ever seen. This game is going to ship early next year from Bungie, and this is the first time anybody has ever seen it. It's the first time they've debuted it. And so I'm very happy to welcome on the stage Jason Jones, who is the co-founder of Bungie and the Halo project lead. Halo is the name of this game, and we're going to see, for the first time, Halo. Welcome, Jason.
On July 21st, 1999, Halo was finally introduced to the world at the Macworld Conference and Expo, and the crowd reacted with excitement at the preview trailer showing network play, vehicle combat, and huge environments. Steve Jobs announced that Halo would be released for both the Mac OS and Windows operating systems. However, Microsoft was witness to the unveiling as well, but back to that in a second. Halo continued to go through different iterations during the course of its development, looking much more complete at E3 2000 than it did back at Macworld the year before. But in game tests, Halo felt clunky. Jason Jones's team suggested a transition to a first-person shooter, which Jones initially shot down. However, he eventually relented given the improvements in 3D rendering technology that had been made since the release of Marathon, a game that proved complicated to build for Jones back in the early 90s when it was in development. Halo had finally taken its form as a first-person shooter, and testers displayed much more emotional attachment to the game with a new perspective. Meanwhile, Microsoft, which previously worked with Sega on the failing Dreamcast, had been developing their own game console called the Xbox, and they needed a launch title for the system. Halo was the answer, and in June 2000, Microsoft paid Bungie $50 million to acquire the company and Halo along with it, and leaving the rights to Myth and Oni to their former investor Take-Two Interactive. Bungie picked up their bags and moved to Redmond, Washington. The game now had to be expedited as it was set to be released with the Xbox in November 2001. Nonetheless, Microsoft marketers slapped the Combat Evolved subtitle onto the game, feeling that Halo alone wasn't descriptive enough, and the game was released with the Xbox on November 15, 2001. The rest is history. The game was a smash hit, selling millions of copies. And with the launch of the Xbox Live in 2002 and the addition of online matches to the game, a new precedent for multiplayer gaming was set. Alex Seropian and Jason Jones had gone from jobless post-grads with crazy dreams, working out of a dilapidated Chicago apartment, to building one of the most successful video game franchises in the history of the world. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please like and comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. For now, I'm American Ben, reminding you to never forget the men and women who have perished fighting aliens throughout the universe. Heroes who died defending freedom. We fight on for them, my brethren, and for Argentina. I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.